What if I told you there's a mental state where your harshest critic, that voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough, completely disappears? Where you become so absorbed in what you're doing that self-doubt vanishes, fear melts away, and you perform at levels you never thought possible? This isn't some new age fantasy or wishful thinking. This is a scientifically documented phenomenon that athletes, artists, writers, and inventors have been tapping into for centuries. The greatest achievements in human history, from Michael Jordan's clutch shots to Mozart's symphonies, didn't happen when these people were trying harder or pushing through their inner critic. They happened when they entered what psychologists call the zone. Today, I'm going to reveal the one practice that creates this state on demand. And by the end of this video, you'll have the exact blueprint to silence your inner critic forever. Before we dive into the solution, let's talk about the problem. Your inner critic isn't just an annoying voice. It's a silent destroyer that's been sabotaging your potential since childhood. Picture this. You're about to give a presentation at work. Instead of focusing on your message, what happens? That voice starts up. Everyone's going to see right through you. You don't know what you're talking about. They're all more qualified than you. Sound familiar? Or maybe you're trying to learn a new skill. Guitar, painting, coding. But every time you make a mistake, there it is again. You're too old to learn this. Other people pick this up so much faster. You're wasting your time. Here's what's really happening in your brain during these moments. Neuroscientists have discovered that when your inner critic is active, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for executive function and creativity, actually becomes less efficient. It's like trying to drive with the handbrake on. But here's the fascinating part. There's a mental state where this critical voice doesn't just quiet down. It completely vanishes. And in that silence, something extraordinary happens. When you enter what psychologists call flow state, your brain releases a powerful cocktail of neurochemicals that literally rewire your mental experience. We're talking about norepinephrine, which heightens focus and attention; dopamine, which increases motivation and reward-seeking behavior; endorphins, which block pain and create feelings of pleasure; anandamide, which promotes lateral thinking and creative insights. But here's the kicker, and this is where it gets really interesting. During flow, activity in your prefrontal cortex actually decreases in a process called transient hypofrontality. Now, before you think that sounds bad, let me explain why this is actually incredible. The prefrontal cortex is home to your inner critic. It's where self-consciousness lives, where doubt breeds, where that nagging voice telling you you're not good enough originates. When this area downregulates during flow, something magical happens. The critic falls silent. Athletes describe it as being in the zone. Writers talk about the words flowing effortlessly onto the page. Musicians say the music plays itself. In these moments, they're not battling their inner critic because it simply isn't there. So how do you access this state? After decades of research, scientists have identified 3 essential conditions that must be present for flow to emerge. I call these the 3 pillars of flow. Flow requires crystal clear objectives, not vague aspirations like get better at guitar, but specific, immediate targets like nail this chord progression without looking at my fingers. The goal needs to be so clear that you know instantly whether you're succeeding or failing. Think about video games for a moment. Why are they so addictive? Because they're flow state machines. Every level has a clear objective. Collect the coins, defeat the boss, reach the checkpoint. You always know exactly what you're supposed to do. Your inner critic thrives in ambiguity. When you don't know what success looks like, it fills that void with doubt and comparison. But when your goal is laser-focused, there's no room for the critic's commentary. The second pillar is immediate, unambiguous feedback. You need to know moment by moment whether you're on track or need to adjust. This isn't about waiting for someone else's approval. It's about creating systems that give you instant information about your performance. A rock climber gets immediate feedback from the rock itself. If they place their hand wrong, they feel it instantly. A surgeon gets immediate feedback from the patient's vital signs. A jazz musician gets immediate feedback from how the notes sound and how the audience responds. When feedback is immediate, your brain enters a state of intense focus. There's no time for self-doubt because you're completely absorbed in responding to what's happening right now. The inner critic can't keep up with the speed of real-time feedback. The third pillar is the most crucial. The challenge must perfectly match your skill level. Too easy, and you get bored. Too difficult, and you get anxious. But when the challenge is just slightly above your current ability, what researchers call the stretch zone, flow emerges. This is where most people get it wrong. They either play it safe, staying in their comfort zone where the inner critic has plenty of time to chatter, or they bite off more than they can chew, triggering anxiety and self-doubt. The sweet spot is that narrow band where you're challenged enough to require your full attention, but not so challenged that you feel overwhelmed. It's like Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold, but just right. Now, here's where flow gets really profound. When all three pillars align, something extraordinary happens to your sense of self. Psychologists call it ego dissolution, the temporary disappearance of self-consciousness. In everyday life, you're constantly monitoring yourself. How do I look? What are people thinking? Am I doing this right? This self-monitoring is exhausting, and it's exactly what feeds your inner critic. But in flow, this self-awareness vanishes. You stop being the person doing the activity and become the activity itself. The tennis player becomes the tennis. The painter becomes the painting. The writer becomes the story. There's no separation between you and what you're doing. When there's no you to criticize, the inner critic has nothing to latch onto. It's like trying to throw a punch at smoke. There's simply nothing there to hit. This isn't just philosophical mumbo-jumbo. Brain scans show that during flow, the areas associated with self-criticism and social comparison literally quiet down. The default mode network, the brain's selfing system, becomes less active. Here's something that might blow your mind. In flow state, peak performance feels effortless. Athletes often describe their greatest achievements as happening without trying. Writers talk about stories that wrote themselves. Artists describe paintings that painted themselves. This seems to contradict everything we've been taught about success, requiring hard work and struggle. But here's the key insight. It's not that less effort is required. It's that the effort becomes so perfectly aligned with the task that it feels effortless. Think of it like a river flowing downhill. The water isn't working hard to move. It's following the natural path of least resistance. But that doesn't mean no energy is involved. The flow contains tremendous power precisely because it's not fighting against itself. This is the exact opposite of what happens when your inner critic is active. When you're battling self-doubt, you're like a river trying to flow uphill. Most of your energy gets wasted on internal resistance rather than moving toward your goal. In flow, all that mental energy that usually goes toward self-criticism, it's redirected toward the task at hand. You become incredibly efficient because there's no internal friction slowing you down. All right, enough theory. Let's get practical. How do you actually trigger flow state in your daily life? Researchers have identified specific flow triggers, environmental and psychological conditions that increase your likelihood of entering this state. Intense focus. Single tasking is non-negotiable. Your phone goes away. Your browser tabs get closed. You create an environment where distraction is impossible. The inner critic feeds on divided attention, so complete focus starves it out. Present moment awareness. Flow only happens in the now. When your attention is fully absorbed in what you're doing right this second, there's no mental bandwidth left for the critics running commentary about past failures or future fears. Intrinsic motivation. You have to care about what you're doing, not because someone else told you to, but because it matters to you personally. When you're intrinsically motivated, engagement becomes automatic. High consequences. This doesn't mean life or death situations, but scenarios where the stakes feel real to you. Public speaking, athletic competition, creative deadlines. When failure has meaningful consequences, your brain locks into laser focus. Rich environments. Complexity and unpredictability can trigger flow. This is why many people find flow in nature, hiking, surfing, skiing. The environment demands your full attention and provides constant, varied feedback. Deep embodiment. Physical activities that require full body coordination naturally trigger flow. This is why athletes often find flow more easily than people in purely mental pursuits. Shared goals. When you're working toward a common objective with others, the social dynamics can amplify flow. Think about musicians jamming together or athletes playing team sports. Close proximity. Being physically near others who are also pursuing flow can create a contagious effect. This is why co-working spaces and group fitness classes can be so effective. Element of risk. Not physical danger, necessarily, but emotional or creative risk. When you're putting yourself out there, vulnerability paradoxically creates the conditions for flow. Now, let me give you a concrete system you can implement starting today. I call it the daily flow practice, and it's designed to gradually train your brain to access flow state more frequently and reliably. Step 1. Choose your flow activity. Pick one specific activity that you'll use as your flow training ground. This should be something you genuinely enjoy and that naturally lends itself to the 3 pillars we discussed. It could be playing an instrument, drawing, coding, cooking, exercising, anything where you can set clear goals, get immediate feedback, and adjust the difficulty. Step 2. Design your session. Every flow session needs structure. Start with a 20-minute commitment, long enough to get into the state, short enough to maintain intensity. Set one specific measurable goal for each session. Not get better at piano, but play this piece at 120 BPM without mistakes. Step 3. Eliminate distractions. Create a fortress of focus. Phone in airplane mode. Internet off if possible. Tell people you're not available. The inner critic loves to hide behind distractions, so remove its hiding places. Step 4. Warm up gradually. Don't jump straight into the challenge zone. Start with something slightly below your skill level to build confidence and momentum. This primes your brain for flow by establishing a positive feedback loop before ramping up the difficulty. Step 5. Find your edge. Gradually increase the challenge until you hit that sweet spot where you're fully engaged but not overwhelmed. You'll know you're there when time seems to disappear and your focus becomes effortless. Step 6. Track your progress. After each session, write down what worked and what didn't. How long did it take to enter flow? What helped or hindered the process? This meta-awareness helps you optimize your approach over time. Here's what's incredible about consistent flow practice. The benefits compound exponentially. Each time you enter flow, you're literally rewiring your brain to access this state more easily. Neuroscientists call this flow proneness, the ability to enter flow states more frequently and with less effort. People who regularly practice flow activities develop enhanced pattern recognition, faster processing speeds, and increased creativity that extends far beyond their specific flow activity. But most importantly for our purposes, they develop what I call critic immunity. The more time you spend in flow states, the less power your inner critic has over you in all areas of life. You start to recognize that critical voice as just noise, not truth. Think of it like physical fitness. The more you exercise, the stronger you become, and that strength supports you even when you're not actively working out. Flow training works the same way. It builds mental fitness that improves your entire life experience. As you develop your flow practice, something remarkable happens. The confidence and clarity you gain start to influence every aspect of your life. Decisions become easier because you trust your instincts more. Relationships improve because you're less defensive and more present. Work performance increases because you waste less energy on self-doubt. This isn't just about silencing your inner critic during flow activities. It's about fundamentally changing your relationship with that critical voice everywhere it shows up. You start to recognize the critic's patterns, how it escalates under stress, how it disguises fear as being realistic, how it keeps you small by convincing you that other people are somehow fundamentally different or more capable than you. But once you've experienced the silence of flow, once you've tasted what it's like to perform without the commentary, you can never quite believe the critic's lies in the same way again. Let's talk about why this approach works when so many other methods for dealing with the inner critic fail. Most traditional approaches focus on fighting the critic directly, challenging negative thoughts, practicing positive self-talk, trying to argue with the voice. But here's the problem. When you fight the inner critic, you're still giving it attention and energy. You're still operating from the premise that it's a real threat that needs to be dealt with. It's like trying to stop thinking about a pink elephant. The very effort reinforces what you're trying to avoid. Flow state works differently. Instead of fighting the critic, it simply makes the critic irrelevant. When you're completely absorbed in optimal performance, there's literally no mental space for self-criticism to exist. This creates what psychologists call experiential proof, direct, embodied evidence that peak performance is possible without the critic's input. In fact, you discover that the critic actually interferes with peak performance. Once you have this experiential proof, the critic's power over you fundamentally shifts. It becomes much easier to dismiss because you have concrete evidence that it's not helping you perform better, it's making you perform worse. Common obstacles and how to overcome them. Now, let's address the challenges you're likely to face as you develop your flow practice, because understanding these obstacles ahead of time will help you navigate them successfully. Obstacle 1. The impatience trap. Many people expect to enter flow immediately and become frustrated when it doesn't happen right away. Remember, flow is a skill that develops over time. Some sessions will be better than others. The key is consistency, not perfection. Obstacle 2. The comparison game. Your inner critic might try to get back at you by comparing your flow experiences to what others achieve. Real athletes enter flow for hours, but you only manage 10 minutes. Don't fall for this trap. Everyone's flow experience is unique. Obstacle 3. The perfectionism paradox. Ironically, trying to achieve perfect flow states can prevent flow from happening. Flow emerges when you're focused on the process, not the outcome. Trust the practice and let go of controlling the results. Obstacle 4. The comfort zone creep. As you get better at chosen activity, you might unconsciously start choosing easier challenges to maintain a sense of success. But flow requires that stretch zone. Regularly reassess and adjust your challenge level. Obstacle 5. The integration challenge. Some people experience flow in their chosen activity, but struggle to apply the insights to other areas of life. This is where the meta skills become crucial, learning to recognize the conditions that create flow and intentionally designing them into different contexts. The long-term vision. A life beyond the critic. Imagine waking up 6 months from now with a fundamentally different relationship to that voice in your head. Instead of starting each day battling self-doubt, you wake up curious about what you'll create, what challenges you'll embrace, what new edges you'll explore. Your inner critic hasn't disappeared entirely. That's not the goal, and probably not possible for most people. But it's been relegated to its proper role, an occasional advisor rather than a constant dictator. You've learned to distinguish between useful self-reflection and destructive self-criticism. More importantly, You've developed an unshakable knowing that peak performance and deep fulfillment are available to you whenever you create the right conditions. You don't need to wait for inspiration to strike or for perfect circumstances to align. You have a reliable method for accessing your best self on demand. This is what's possible when you commit to regular flow practice. Not just better performance in your chosen activity, but a complete transformation in how you show up in the world. Advanced flow techniques. Once you've established a basic flow practice, there are advanced techniques that can deepen your experience and expand its applications. Flow stacking involves chaining multiple flow activities together to extend the state. For example, you might start with a physical flow activity like yoga, then transition into a creative flow activity like writing, maintaining the focused attention throughout. Microflow is about finding flow in everyday activities. Washing dishes can become a flow activity if you approach it with the right mindset, setting clear intentions, paying full attention to the sensations, finding the optimal rhythm and technique. Social flow facilitation involves creating flow conditions in group settings. This might mean designing meetings that incorporate clear goals, immediate feedback, and appropriate challenges, or facilitating team activities that naturally generate collective flow states. Cross-training flow involves practicing flow in multiple domains to develop transferable meta skills. Someone might practice flow through rock climbing, chess, and cooking, building a robust ability to recognize and create flow conditions across different contexts. The inner critic has controlled your potential long enough. It's time to experience what lies beyond that voice, the silence where your greatest achievements are waiting.